New Balance is among the biggest, most well-known shoemakers in the world, surpassing $5 billion in sales in 2022, and by that measure, they are doing better today than ever before. They have grown to that size in an unconventional way, and I have to respect a company who believes in what they're doing enough to ignore the competitors and continue on with their own thing. You will see this throughout the video, but when you compare them to pretty much any other major athletic shoe brand, Nike or Adidas or whatever else, they have done things differently, both behind the scenes and as far as the public's perception. They have always been privately owned, so they've been able to make some unusual decisions without having to worry about the effects of the stock price or the wishes of the shareholders. Sometimes that has been a good thing, while other times it has set them back. The performance of this company at any given time is not necessarily reflected to the performance of the rest of the industry. It has led to some unique rises and falls, and I think it's fascinating, so in this video, I want to talk about the history of New Balance while highlighting some of these changes. Despite being called New Balance, the company has roots going back over a century, making them older than all the other major athletic shoe brands. It was started in 1906 by William Riley, who was originally from Ireland but immigrated to the United States, where in Boston he founded the New Balance Arch Company. Yeah, in the beginning they made arch inserts and prescription shoes, mostly sold to the hardworking blue-collar community around Boston, who spent most of the day standing up. This is funny, he had been watching a chicken walk on its 3 toes, and it gave him the idea of making an insert with 3 points of support, kind of like a new way to balance. So the name of this company is technically derived from the way a chicken supports itself, something that you probably did not expect to hear. They continued to sell those arches and orthopedic footwear to the Boston area, and really that is how New Balance existed for the next 60 plus years. The most significant things to happen over this time was that the company was sold in the 1950s, and then a few years later, the new owners introduced a running shoe called the Trackster that became popular among local athletes. But I have to emphasize that entering into the 1970s even, New Balance was comparatively a much smaller company. Seriously, almost nobody knew about them outside of the New England area, and even there, it was unlikely. It was a modest mail-order business with 6 employees working to manufacture 30 pairs of shoes a day. What I would consider the start of the modern-day New Balance company as we know it occurred in 1972 when it was taken over by Jim Davis. At 28 years old, he had spent the last few years working in sales and aspired to own his own business. The existing owner of New Balance was looking to retire. Davis was impressed by the shoes, felt it was a promising market, so he pulled together his savings and took out a loan to buy the company. And I have to say that he could not have had better timing, leading me to the initial rise of New Balance, the jogging craze. Oh my gosh, in the 1970s, jogging became the next big thing. Before, only serious athletes were doing it, and now seemingly everyone concerned with their health was doing it. I've actually talked about this on the channel before because logically, this jogging craze helped establish multiple athletic brands. It makes sense, right? People needed shoes to go running, so the market exploded, and the people making these shoes benefited from it, including New Balance, arguably even more than the others. The 320 is the shoe that really put them on the map. It was blue and white with that iconic N symbol on the side, the first shoe to ever have it, giving it a distinctive look. It was comfortable not only because it had a special design, but because unlike others, it was available in a variety of different widths. And they even offered the W320, marketed as the first running shoe truly fit for women. Overall, they set out to make a comfortable shoe that was easily recognizable, and that is what they accomplished. In 1976, Runner's World magazine ranked it at the top of their list of the best running shoes, and that was like the spark they needed to explode in popularity. They were bragging about that #1 spot in their advertisements, and it became the most popular running shoe in the country. Just imagine that, becoming the #1 running shoe during a massive running craze. New Balance became a household name, and over the next decade, sales literally grew 600 times higher, from 100,000 to 60 million. I also want to mention, that year, they introduced the 990, retailing at $100, which was absolutely unheard of at the time. Even even the original Jordans were only $65 when they came out a few years later, and that brings me to their first fall. I know I'm simplifying this quite a bit, but I'm going to say that the biggest reason for their trouble starting in the 1980s was their failure to keep up with the competition. Consider that this was a rapidly growing and rapidly changing market. Nike, for example, clearly the biggest success story to come out of this, started focusing on other sports outside of running. They relied on celebrity endorsements and lowered their costs by manufacturing their shoes overseas. All tactics that proved to be effective and have since been adopted by most of the industry. Meanwhile, Jim Davis at New Balance felt that providing a comfortable, quality shoe should be their top priority. Think about earlier, that's what they had done with the 320. They made a good shoe, it got recognition, and everything was built from there. So while Nike and all the others were spending money to make their shoes seem cool and exciting, New Balance invested everything into innovating the shoes themselves. I should mention that they did have one major endorsement when they paid James Worthy from the Los Angeles Lakers an estimated $1 million to promote their shoes. I know that doesn't sound like much today, but it was the biggest deal in the league at the time and very uncharacteristic, not only because it went against their core strategy, but because he was a member of the Lakers, who happened to be the main rival of their hometown Boston Celtics. However, the contract was not renewed, and that was their only major NBA deal for the next 3 decades. Jim Davis even refused to manufacture the shoes in cheaper countries because it felt that it would mean a sacrifice in quality. So even though New Balance continued to release quality products, they weren't as stylish or advertised as heavily, so the brand started to fall. Sales growth slowed down, they started losing money, and a lot of people simply started seeing them as lame. The way that they recovered from this also has a lot of factors to it, but I'm just going to put down the words dad shoes. That is the popular term. New Balance became a popular shoe among dads, which isn't necessarily cool, but there are a lot of dads out there.
Shoes made for running.
But worn by chubby white guys in their late 30s to early 40s.
It makes perfect sense when you think about it. If you are a father in your 40s, there's a good chance that you don't want to wear the same kind of shoes as your son and all of his friends. Maybe you think they're childish, or you couldn't pull them off, or maybe you just want to have something different. Plus, older people, or parents specifically, tend to value comfort over style, and that is exactly what New Balance has been providing. And I don't mean to insult them by implying that they're putting out ugly shoes. That's up to interpretation. I'm simply saying that New Balance wasn't putting in as much effort to specifically design and promote them in a way that's appealing to the often younger, more fashion-conscious community. They embraced their role of more of a lifestyle brand, and it helped them grow to $1 billion in sales by the year 2000, which, by the way, was still nowhere near the level of Nike, but they had settled into a narrower demographic and were doing really well with it. Now, for the next fall, it's not a dramatic one, but they have dealt with a lot of backlash concerning their Made in USA claims. Over the years, they have heavily advertised that their shoes are made domestically. People think of quality when they hear that, and that's been their big selling point, so it makes sense. But with seemingly everyone else moving production to countries with cheaper labor, it almost becomes impractical to keep up with them without doing it yourself. It is considerably less money. I believe it was in the 1990s when they started some production outside of the US, but continued the claim that it was made in USA, so that led to charges from the Federal Trade Commission saying that it was deceptive. And even today, they have a popular collection called Made in USA that they say contains a domestic value of 70% or more. That's not 100%, potentially misleading. So in 2021, there was a lawsuit filed concerning that. Wherever you stand on these claims, I want to make it clear that they do still have big production facilities in the US and manufacture more shoes in the country than anyone else. Also, it keeps going, in 2016, a representative of New Balance made a statement opposing the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It was a potential trade agreement that would have made it cheaper to import shoes from select countries, likely further discouraging US production. It all became political and seen as an endorsement of Donald Trump, who was also opposing the partnership. Jim Davis also contributed $400,000 to his campaign, so people were criticizing them, boycotting them, and the whole thing blew up, and New Balance quickly became a controversial brand. Fortunately, things have improved quite a bit from that point. The final rise of New New Balance can mostly be attributed to endorsements and collaborations. I know, it is the exact opposite of what you would expect from them. It's almost like they have been slowly conforming to the rest of the industry, but still very much in their own way. In 2018, Joe Preston became their new CEO, supported by Chris Davis, son of Jim Davis, as head of marketing, and they very much seem to share a vision for New Balance that includes breaking out of that narrow dad market by using heavy promotion. That year, NBA player Kawhi Leonard felt that Jordan wasn't offering him a deal comparable to the ones offered to other players of his status, so New Balance took that as an opportunity to make their own endorsement deal with him. Their first major NBA deal since James Worthy in the 1980s, by the way. Leonard went on to win the NBA championship the following year, and that was followed by some other big-time endorsement deals. I'll mention that the rapper Jack Harlow has been promoting them and even wore New Balance in the remake of White Man Can't Jump, which in the original from 1992 had featured Nikes. New Balance has also been involved in multiple collaborations, maybe the most notable ones being with Teddy Santis and his ALD label. He went on to become the new creative director for the New Balance Made in the USA line. I'll admit, I don't know too much about the ins and outs of the fashion world, but it is almost like New Balance has been given a new life. They've been breaking out of that perception as a dad shoe into a more legitimately cool brand. It has been interesting to watch. A lot of celebrities have been wearing them, further influencing people to buy them, so New Balance has been doing better than ever, impressively doubling their sales over the past decade. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about New Balance? The answer to that question probably depends on your demographic, because New Balance has been all over the place. Worn by supermodels in London and dads in Ohio, as one of their campaigns put it. Seriously, what else can you say that about? It is an unusual evolution that is built into a brand that is very much unlike anything else I have seen. I'm curious to hear what you think about it, so any thoughts you have about New Balance, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.